pentagram dedicated to Henry Foreman. In the years of the primal force and the dawn of terrestrial birth, man mastered the mammoth and horde, and man was the lord of the earth.
Hello my friends, welcome to Agitators Anonymous, episode 214. I'm Alan Averill. Thank you for your continued patronage. The numbers keep going up on all of the podcast platforms, so thank you for sticking with me for all of these. Well, it's turning into years, is it not? Well, some of you ask me why I don't post all of the podcasts onto YouTube. Well, the answer is that I'm trying to move people across to the podcast platforms, and also the YouTube page has all of the Primordial videos. You've probably seen the video we just made for Nothing New Under the Sun, an interesting track from the last album, which was written about splitting the atom and Oppenheimer and all that, actually before the movie came out, but would have been clever to maybe release it to tie in with the movie when we heard about it, but we're not that organised. But one of the reasons why I don't post all of the podcasts on YouTube is, to be honest, because, it sort of makes the YouTube page just only seem like mine and nothing to do with the bands. And to be honest, most of the views come from the Primordial stuff that's on there. So maybe it's best for people to listen on the podcast platforms. And that's an alliteration, is it not? And so to move people towards the podcast platforms. Because, who really listens to podcasts on YouTube? I mean, enough people do. But even if you take somebody like Sam Harris or something, he still only gets 20 or 30,000, listens in total on YouTube. And in reality, the numbers don't really grow on YouTube. Also, people had started to tear strips off each other in some of the arguments on YouTube. Now, I'm aware that some of that is bots, but also... And it's a complicated thing because people then shout at me, oh, you turn the comments off, are you against free speech? Obviously, no, I'm an advocate of free speech, but this doesn't mean just saying anything you want on somebody else's page, because it gets my page shadow banned, and I'm also then responsible for the comments on my YouTube. And sometimes you just have a headache curating them and trying to, split people apart and just argue with them with some kind of reason or something like this, because an awful lot of what's happening now is just such aggressive rhetoric. So that's the reason why. And it's the same on Instagram. I noticed as soon as I posted, I think I posted a podcast about, something silly, the silly title, Joe Biden's something to do with Weekend at Bernie's weekend, and then a picture of Joseph Stalin. And, we're still allowed to have some vague sort of dark sense of humour about these things, some black sense of humour, whatever you want to call it, black humour, dark humour. And instantly people were just tearing strips off each other in the comments on Instagram. And then you delete it, because I am allowed to do that. It is my Instagram page. I don't necessarily need super inflammatory comments with people dropping expletives on it. It's my want if I want to delete it. And people go, oh, are you against free speech? And it's like, no, man, it's my Instagram post. If you want to say the things you want to say it on your own Instagram post. That's fine. And it's not the same argument as Instagram pushing or pulling certain narratives or stories, or that's a much broader thing. It's like a micro and macro sort of argument. I mean, I get it. But at the same time, So this is a sort of stopgap episode, as ever, sponsored by Metal Blade Records. So it's Metal Blade. You put indiemerch.com/Metal Blade Records. Follow the links underneath. You'll see what I mean. And you can get 10% off your order, which these days means quite a lot considering how expensive things have become. So this is a sort of stopgap episode because I'm going to be away next week between 2 weekends of gigs. To try and get a little bit of, what can we say, vitamin D from this awful summer that we're having in Ireland. It is literally just sort of overcast, muggy, inclement. Muggy and Clement sounds a bit like a sort of 1920s Chicago mobster. Yeah, my name is Muggy and Clement. Anyway, what am I talking about? Yeah, it's overcast, 16, 17 degrees, raining a lot of the time. So, listen, forgive me, and my, my ginger complexion, but I'm going to go and try and get burnt somewhere. But what I want to do with this stopgap podcast is, some of you may remember in the 1990s there was a thing called the RTE Metal Show, and it was a sort of staple of the Irish metal scene from nearly all of the 90s. It started, like many things, around 1990. You remember, you've probably watched MTV Headbangers Ball. This was one of the death knells for metal in the sort of commercial in the mainstream. When MTV used to show music and you could turn it on at 3 in the afternoon and you might see Sepultura, or you could see Alice in Chains, or you might see, you could see lots of things. You could see Metallica at 3 in the day, you could see One. And then there was Headbangers Ball, which was 2 hours, 3 hours. But slowly but surely, MTV realised they had better viewing figures for I don't know what, these sort of reality TV shows. This sort of, let's put 12 asshole, kids in a San Francisco apartment and watch them argue. And this was kind of one of the births of reality TV, which kind of spelt the end, at least for metal and rock, on one level. It's one of the contributing factors in the sort of, by 92, 93, 94, it began to go from 2 or 3 hours to an hour to half an hour. And then they just, axed it completely. But in Ireland, we had this, the 2FM Metal Show, John Kenny. And I think it started in the early 90s, and everybody used to listen to it. It was on a Sunday, and you could hear like Deicide, you could hear Incantation, bands that I knew, of course, but they had their top 10, and it was important for Irish bands. Primordial was on there for our demo in 93, and I think, what you're going to hear is an interview between me and the presenter from 1998. I just found it in a random old file, and it's quite unusual to hear your voice from 1998, 1997. But also just some interesting Primordial stuff in there. But also for people who maybe remember the John Kenny show or the RTE show or the Metal Show, might be a little bit of nostalgia there. And also because it's a stopgap episode and I need something to pad it out to the end. So forgive me if it's a little bit self-indulgent. But, So this weekend, I suppose Primordial is also playing at Tolminator in Slovenia, because you're going to hear this next week, which is the kind of the new version of the Slovenian Metal Camp, which was a beautiful festival, beautiful area, all these lovely wooden cabins by the lake or whatever. Something happened there. It's by the river, sorry, not the lake. Something happened there. I don't want to get into exactly what happened, but Tolminator is the the predecessor, not the predecessor, the follow-on, the son-of. And we are playing, I think, with Electric Wizard, Destroyer 666, loads of great bands. So that's in Slovenia. And then the day after, Canecas Metal Fest in Spain, which is, I think, on the Saturday. So, there you go. So what I'm going to do now is just some advice for bands, and I think it's really important advice. You may have noticed lately that there's an awful lot of instances of gear being stolen by bands. You've probably seen it on Instagram, you've probably seen it, or whatever platform you're on. Such and such a band in such and such a place has had all of their gear stolen. So what I'm going to do is give some, I think it's really salutary advice, it's good advice, and that is get yourself an Airtag. Now, what this is it's like it's like one of those things you get when you order food somewhere, and it's like a little disc with a light on it, and it goes red when you're whatever horrible stuff let's say whatever your salmon and falafel and whatever healthy meal you're ordering for yourself is ready. You go to the counter. Anyway, it's an Airtag. Look it up, Google it, because it's the story I'm going to tell you. It's going to be seem very, very important. So what it is it's basically like a GPS tag that you put in your gear. You put in your guitar case. Mick from Primordial, before he left, well, obviously, he used to do this all the time, and it always struck me as a brilliant idea, but for some reason I just never quite got around to doing it, because the bass that I have is so old and so expensive. The idea of not putting an AirTag in it now for years just seems kind of idiotic, because it just shows you, and he would often bring it up on his phone, a map, and he would say, look, there's the AirTag, and you can see it's moving, and you'd be able to track literally as somebody was bringing it to the oversized baggage, the little conveyor belt, and out the bass would pop. And I just thought, wow, what an incredible idea. But I'm going to tell you a story. I'm not going to mention the name of the festival, the name of the band. The names have been changed to protect the innocent. But, so said band, they stashed their gear in a locked container the day before said festival. And on the day of that festival, the organization found out that the lock of the container had been broken and all of the gear was gone, along with all of the stuff from the festival. So said band had to go on stage in about 3 hours, and it looked like they were doomed. But their guitar player had an AirTag in his guitar case, and that they could see that the stuff was just a few blocks away. I.e. the people who had stolen it had it stashed in a house that was pretty near. So they assembled a posse, and I think you can imagine what the posse might look like. And they were driving along what they thought was like a sort of normal neighborhood. Then it got a little bit more shady. And, they were able to hone in on one apartment where the AirTag was still emitting its signal. Basically, they guarding the front and guarding the back, talked to some of the neighbours, and neighbours were like, yeah, some dodgy dudes live in there. And so the cops came, and with the help of the janitor, they opened the door, and it would look like some old woman's apartment. But with the help of the AirTags, they were able to find their stuff packed underneath some floorboards, I think. And of course, stickers removed, pins already shaved off, ready to be resold. So they got their stuff back. They noted the license plate of the car in the drive and some dodgy people hanging around, and gave them to the cops. And the cops, it would seem, were like, oh, yeah, these guys again. So after a little bit of paperwork, went back to the festival, and they got their stuff back and they were able to play. Right. It's the moral of the story. Of course, people have learned that gear from bands is a very easy thing to rob, and it's also a very lucrative thing to rob. And, that there are always unscrupulous people who will buy anything, and that it's easy stuff to sell on. So my advice as a salutary tale from this weekend is get yourself an AirTag to put in your guitar, to put even in, put it underneath the bass drum, put it, whatever you've got, put an AirTag in it, because that will mean that you can trace your gear, even if it's lost in an airport. I mean, I've been in airports. I remember being, when we came back from Russia, the last time we played in Russia, I think Morning Beloved guys were playing, I think a few days after us. And if I'm not mistaken, one of the guys just saw our guitars just sitting in the corner. I'm probably getting that a bit mixed up, a bit confused, but they went over and said, hey, we recognize those guitars, like, what are they doing here, the kind of thing. And I was more beloved, it could have been Cruachan, I'm not really sure, but either way, the sort of local airport authorities were informed and were like, oh yeah, for some reason nobody took them in. And well, look, you can imagine how the story goes. But an AirTag, and you would have been able to see this. Or let's just say your guitar is just like stuck, and somebody just can't be bothered carrying it to the little conveyor where the little shutter opens and out it springs. They just can't be bothered carrying it because it's too heavy, and they're knocking off in 5 minutes, and you know how it goes. Well, this is the perfect antidote to that, because I've stood there beside Mick while he's shown an airport official and gone, look, there's my AirTag. I can see it's there. It's literally around the corner on the other side of the wall. A little bit of arguing. It's your stuff. And if somebody will go and get it for you. So there you go. A tiny bit of band advice. And no, this podcast is not sponsored by AirTag, although it should be. My friends, get yourselves AirTags and protect those damn instruments from people out there trying to steal them. Rhyming and stealing. All right. Here is a little stopgap interview. This is me talking to the 2FM Metal Show in Ireland back in 1997, I think it might even be 1998, for the release of the album Journey's End. And there's lots of sort of interesting odd tidbits in there. Is it tidbits or titbits? I'd say it's tidbits, isn't it? Yeah. What's the etymology of that word? Someone drop that into the comments, please. I'd like to know. I'm sure it's some Victorian thing about playing cricket or something or other. Anyway, my name is Muggy and Clement, and this is Agitators Anonymous, and here's a little piece of nostalgic Irish heavy metal, minor history. But I will say, nostalgia aside, be warned, this is the voice of a young man trying to prove himself, trying to score a few points, trying to settle a few old scores, all that kind of thing. And maybe sound a little bit pretentious here and there. Go easy on him. Go easy on the young version of me. Here I am talking about Journey's End.
And it is their second release. Alan's been telling me about the release of the first album.
There's one CD which came out before, which came out in more or less the end of 1995, start of 1996, on Cacophonous Records, called Imrama, and that was the first one. And then there was the split 10-inch with Catatonia, and a rather large hiatus between the first and second CDs. So people could be forgiven for thinking that we sort of disappeared, and to some, to all intents and purposes, to a lot of people, this probably is the first one that they're hearing, at the moment.
And there is a change of labels, of course, as well.
Yeah, there is, yeah.
Imrama, how did that go?
That went fine. I mean, the label we were on did virtually nothing for us, and very little promotion, so it sold from kind of word of mouth, and I think it did fine for what it was, at the time, but because there was no promotion or nothing behind it, it really just had to sell by itself. So, this is one of the reasons why we left the label. Acrimonious
splits? I know Cradle of Filth left them kind of acrimoniously.
Yeah, as Danny said in the interview, crapped off on us. I think that a lot of people left at the time because the organisation wasn't very good, and a lot of the business end of things just wasn't working. The people who are there are good people, I think, but they just weren't able to hold it together at the time, and I think they lost a lot of people through that.
Is it too small a label?
Too small? Maybe too small for Cradle of Filth, definitely. But Cacophonous really survived in many respects off Cradle of Filth, as Candlelight do off Emperor, etc. Most labels have one band who
do the business for them.
For them, and Cradle definitely do the business for Cacophonous. And thus, other bands, I think, suffered by that because they were somewhat neglected. I don't know. There's about 5 or 6 labels in the underground who are, relatively big, and Cacophonous are one, but unfortunately they've lost all the bands who built them.
Well, that's behind you now. We know of you of playing demos from you in the past, but you've now moved on to your own thing, your own, well, I suppose it's the major release, this is what you would call. And how's it been going for you so far? It's released, in June? Or there was actually a delay, wasn't there?
Yeah, it came out in the end of June, but unfortunately in Europe, a lot of places, like distribution places and promoters and many things like that, they actually just take the month of August off. Because in some places it just gets so hot that nobody does anything, especially around the Mediterranean, and in Germany a lot of the clubs close down. So it's really just starting to it takes about two months to get into circulation, into all the shops and kind of things. So, I mean, it's the first time we've had all the I've had all the media thing of, doing the interviews and all that kind of thing,
Yeah. And how difficult is it for an Irish band to break in? I know yourself and Waylander have released albums recently.
Yeah.
But that's been really it for the last couple of years. It's been kind of quiet.
Yeah, I mean, this has always been the problem, is that the Irish scene has generally been about 5 years behind the rest of Europe, and, what is considered quite a good demo tape by an Irish band really does pale in comparison with, a European band. I don't know what it is. I mean, it seems that especially people like Scandinavians have the mental application to sit at home and play and play and play and learn their instruments, and Irish people seem to perhaps have a bit more of a kind of I won't say a lazy attitude towards that, but definitely they don't work as hard on their instruments. And also in Europe it's easier to get gigs and it's easier to get contacts, I mean, the Cruelcon did release a CD, and I think by the end of the year there will be Arcane Sun, Gyasa and Abaddon Incarnate will also have recorded albums for foreign labels, so it's quite an interesting and exciting year for Irish metal, but I think the scene here is so small and so hardcore. Everybody is basically knows each other and everybody seems to be in a band, but metal, to all intents and purposes, was cleaved in half by a lot of the trends that swept through the country,
Sure. Are the expectations, Alan, here just at that little bit too high? I know I get a lot of demos here from bands who think they're just going to make it.
I think the problem is that problem is here, I think, is that people are too close to England and too close to America. And that people here, especially kids growing up, they're being told that the best bands are English and American bands, you know. Either it's MTV culture or Kerrang culture or Karap culture, as we call it. They're being told, you know, that these are the bands that you want to live up to. So they're trying to be the next Machine Head, the next Fear Factory, the next Deftones, and the next Korn. Which, okay, maybe there's not particularly a lot wrong with that for these people because they're the bands that they like, but there isn't really an opening for these for people trying to be these bands, you know. You're really from the wrong country, you know.
Yeah. So you're basically saying that you should look further abroad and further possibly towards the east.
Yeah, I mean, well, to my mind, bands like, you know, obviously Deftones and Korn, it's not metal to begin with, you know, but
some would argue on that point, but anyway.
Yeah, well, you know, it is an arguable point, but for me it's not. Whatever Kerrang, you know, says is metal, really, I would.
Well, they have garbage in there, so.
Yeah, I would dispute. But however, yeah, I mean, there's a wealth of metal talent that goes on in the rest of Europe and in America as well. Not the stuff that you read in everyday magazines, and it's a case of getting involved in the underground and realizing that there is a lot of labels out there, and there's a lot of openings. There's a lot of underground magazines. There's a lot of space out there for bands from every ilk within the metal scene. I mean, metal scene now is going from one end from Arcturus with, you know, Kurt Weill influences and stuff, all the way to just straight ahead metal like Manowar, you know, and you've got everything in between, including, you know, industrial metal bands and everything, you know.
Just to refer back to the record labels now, moving away from Cacophony, you're onto Misanthropy now, and Journey's End is the album. And again, to that point as well, are they going to push the album in Europe as distinct from these isles?
Yeah, I mean, we have distribution in more or less every country in the world, basically. I mean, even distribution in Russia and Ukraine and, you know, Malaysia and Israel and stuff, which might surprise a lot of people who are just, you know, maybe on the off chance listening and are into normal music, because it's very difficult for people with, you know, to really comprehend the vast network that exists. But yeah, I mean, I've been doing interviews for the last month or two with all the foreign magazines. So,
and what's the reaction been like?
Generally, it's been really good. I mean, some people have just the worst we've got is a good review. We've got, you know, stuff like 14 out of 15 from Heavy Oda Voss and stuff from Germany, and that does like 80,000 copies in various magazines, and, you know, 8.5 out of 10 from Rock Hard, which is like kind of the biggest metal magazine in the world, kind of thing. Yeah. So, and then about 2 weeks ago we played at the Wacken Open Air Festival in Germany, which was very strange, with bands like Blind Guardian and Sabotage and Iced Earth and stuff. Like Sabotage sold 1 million records, so yeah, of course, yeah, very, very strange. So yeah, and then at the start of January we go out and tour, so hopefully, you know. Yeah,
I was just going to ask you about touring. Has these positive magazine reviews given you a chance to get gigs you possibly wouldn't have got before?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think people are very interested in the fact that you're Irish, you know. I mean, it does stand to your advantage in ways, because people's level of curiosity is heightened by the fact that, you know, you're not another Swedish band or another Norwegian
or
band.
German, yeah, sure.
Yeah, you know, so people are interested in that. It's just more difficult. You have to make that, you know, the bigger push and extra effort to actually get there, you know, because obviously you're stuck on the arse end of Europe, you know.
Sure. Touring, you were saying there January. Where are you going to tour?
Well, hopefully we've got about 10 days in Germany and Holland and Belgium, and hopefully in the next few months we're going to add on France, Italy, Portugal and Spain, maybe Austria as well.
And a few dates back here again?
Well, hopefully we're going to play here for the end of the year, and we're talking about trying to play in a few places down the country. It's difficult though, you know, trying to play here. The venues are only interested in dance music.
Sure.
And
yeah. That's one thing I was going to ask you as a side shoot of that. What do you think of the scene here now currently? As you say, there's a few bands who will have a couple of things at the end of the year, including Abaddon and Carnate, but the scene, quiet? Too quiet.
I think the thing is that the bands now are better than they ever were in the Irish scene. I mean,
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, they're better than any of the bands that were knocking around in the 80s or any of the bands that were knocking around the start of the 90s, which is where we're kind of from as well. The music is much better. It's just the amount of fans is, you know, dissipated immeasurably. I mean, the amount of gigs is, virtually ground to a halt compared to what it was 10 years ago.
It's remarkable to see that in the last 6 years the audience for the metal show has actually increased over the last while.
Yeah.
It's gone from a low base of nothing to around 50,000.
Yeah,
so they're out there.
They're out there, yeah. I hope they are. I mean, I think it's just mad that Primordial will only... The ceiling perhaps is 200 or 300 CDs for us to sell in Ireland. Which is a bit strange. We would hope that we would be able to do more, but it just seems that Irish people are more content with, buying Fear Factory or Machine Head CDs than actually buying CDs of Irish bands. I think that's one of the things that we kind of tried to point out at the gig we played with Wylander and Arcane Sun in February in the Temple Music Centre. We had over 300 people there, which was really good, but we just said, this is what it's about, This is what you should try and support Irish bands and that kind of thing. I mean, in general, metal has taken a media battering from all the kind of trendy media outlets, for the last 10 years. So I kind of, it does have an effect. Less and less people around, and people disappear, and people grow up, and that kind of thing.
Move on.
They do, yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of moving on, what's the future then for the band? I mean, the tour starts in January in earnest.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it does, yeah. I mean, the title is kind of cryptic in a way, A Journey's End. A lot of people have been wondering, is that it for the band? But I don't know. I mean, I don't think so. The genesis of the band goes back 10 years. So I've been in the band for 7.5. So it doesn't look like we're going to give up now, just when we're about to do things. I don't know. We're going to write some new songs and see what happens, and realise the fact that just because you do one tour doesn't mean this has to be the one time you get to do it, and hopefully we'll expand and get a little bit bigger. I don't know. It's not really about selling CDs or selling lots of CDs, just to do what you want, basically.